Look at this. Doesn't that seem like something I'll be using 30 years from now?
It's got a nice sound to it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, one might say that's sheer genius.
We're off to a flying start.
Yeah, it's important to buy things that are gonna last.
Yeah, because as a culture, we've stopped doing that.
I think one day people are gonna find this video and look back and they're gonna be like, that's how it was done. We grew up in Richmond Hill, Oak Ridges. Technically, I was not in Oak Ridges, so I always felt like I was missing out on that crew. But I did Oak Ridges things. So this is, Richmond Hill in the 80s, mid 80s. And yeah, we know each other going all the way back in scouting, I think all the way to Beavers, which usually when guys say they know each other from Beavers, it's like a strip club or something. But this is different. We go all the way back. Yeah, since we were what, 5?
About 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we grew up camping. We grew up doing activities, and went our ways. And then I guess a few years ago we hooked up again. I saw that you were in filmmaking, and I was making a switch into the filmmaking arts, so to speak. And yeah, we linked up, had some sushi, and here we are. Now we've worked on dozens of projects together, and that's cool. Yeah, so I did a degree in communications and multimedia, and then I went and did a postgrad in public relations. So yeah, really communications driven, and very Marshall McLuhan approach, the whole medium is the message sort of thing. And I took that with video. We studied sort of the history of communications, and I look back to the 50s where you've got radio as the dominant communications medium, and then all of a sudden comes TV, and it blows it out of the water. It's warmer, it's more engaging, and not to say that it eliminated radio. We still listen to radio, and it's kind of making a resurgence.
But video killed the radio star.
Video killed the radio star, right? And the same thing's happening because of the web, where you've got now access to be able to do video, and it's warmer, it's cheaper, it's more engaging, and it's killing static content.
Most people in your life who are in other career fields are not going to be able to relate to your challenges trying to make it as a media artist. But the only kind of person who can relate to the same sort of set of challenges and way of thinking is an entrepreneur.
I would say, and I was thinking about this the other day, I would say that like filmmakers are the ultimate entrepreneurs, where you literally are starting with an idea, and then somehow you like assemble all of these assets to create something like tangible. And you have to wear all the different hats, and you have to, just put yourself in all these uncomfortable places to realize that dream that only you can see in your mind. And it's a challenge, but there's nothing more fulfilling, right? When you make something cool that people really like. Many doc style pieces are kind of like controlled chaos, right? And coming from a communications background, I really put forward to clients that, even though there's no script, this is going to be key message heavy. We're going to make sure that your key messages get across in a way that's natural and authentic. But a lot of business owners and decision makers are super process driven. So for them to not see a script or a storyboard and just to trust these strangers to tell their story, I think it's difficult for them. But, it's just kind of like what you're doing here, getting somebody into an engaging conversation, getting way more than you need, and then getting a story out of that, right? And it's not even so much telling the story about their business a lot of times, it's their story. Because the one thing that I've learned, and I really drive forward in a lot of these, is that people do business with people. So, position these people as experts, and if they know their stuff, it's going to come through. And passion is another big thing. People love to see passion in a business owner or a practitioner or whatever. They want to work with people that really like what they're doing, and it makes the process enjoyable, right? So
I'm having this conversation with you because this is a long sort of exploratory conversation to see what drives you, what are you passionate about, what makes you unique as an individual. That to me is documentary in its purest form.
What kind of crazy shit I could say? Could be anything.
You know, you've basically gone fully into this career transition of doing what you do now.
Gone full video.
Gone full video.
Yeah.
You've left the sort of PR marketing background of work that you did before.
And also the bartending background, which I also did to supplement this business when I started it. But yeah.
I don't think I even knew that.
Yeah, when I started this business, I started working part-time at the Keg just to make rent. And I just made rent every month. And, you know, it's a challenge starting a business. Especially, you know, I left a really good corporate job at a large restaurant brand as a marketing manager. And to go back into the restaurant and to serve, it was a bit of a reality check, right? But you do what you got to do, you know? You have to.
And that's what really drives creative people, is that pragmatically you may have an opportunity to take a different path where you could say, this would actually be more secure. Mm-hmm. This would be guaranteed income, security. I know the path. I know how this career advances. I know how far I can go. Mm-hmm. You know, if I stay in a particular job at a particular company, I can expect this in 5 years. Totally. I can expect this in 10 years. Maybe I'll move to a company like X that will be even better, but the same sort of position. Yeah. And it's more predictable. But when there's that creative bug that drives you, you make choices that to someone else might seem irrational.
You know, that corporate mentality, and I call it the corporate game, you know, it's this chess match, right? You've got to move all your pieces just so and play the game just right, and hopefully it's really out of your control, you're going to get to this final point. Entrepreneurship, you know, you have an ultimate goal, but it's more like Plinko, you know, you drop the ball and like it'll kind of go wherever the hell it goes, and you just got to go with it.
Shift your seat.
Sure.
Roll back like just slightly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I always kind of think like, you know, with ideas, you know, I'm always come up with new ideas for all sorts of stuff that I have clients for, stuff that I don't have clients for, just ideas. And I always worry about like my ideas, you know, people stealing them, but ideas are just out there. You know, if somebody wants to take that and execute on it, go for it. You know, I'll come up with new ideas. That's just the way my brain works. Mm-hmm. So
if you're never able to take the risk of someone thinking your idea is bad, or someone thinking it's so good that they're going to take it without crediting you, if you're never able to take that leap, then you're actually never able to succeed with the ideas in the first place.
And that's one of the reasons I really got into this business in the first place. Like, I've always, since I was a little kid, always had, you know, ideas for commercials or movies or things like that. And I would always tell people these ideas. The difference now is, you know, with 6 years of this business under my belt and a couple of hundred productions, now I know that we can turn this idea and actually execute it. And it'll look very close, hopefully, to what it looks like in my mind. And that's cool. It's not just being able to come up with the idea. Anybody can come up with idea. Creativity is a commodity. It's not something, you know, random. It's this lightning in a bottle thing. It's something that you come up with. There's process involved, but we can just keep pumping them out. You know, we can pump them out all day, every day. It's a cool thing.
Pitch me a ridiculous action movie.
Okay, I think I would probably start with the sequel to a movie that doesn't actually exist, and this one I call Dual Identity 2. DULE, Double Cross. You know, and our main character's name is Chuck Duell, and you know, he was the best of the best, ex-Special Forces, you know, who's out of the game, and they had to pull him back in, you know, for one last job. Probably gonna fight eco-terrorists. It's a combination of, you know, satire, but the way you achieve satire is that this movie is so big and so aggressive that it is satire. It's satire just by how big it is. What starts off as a knife fight on the ground becomes a knife fight holding onto the rung of a helicopter that's sort of flying around violently as they're knife fighting with one hand, holding onto the other. And our final climax is when Chuck Duell finally, gets our villain to fall, and he tumbles down and he smashes through the roof of this giant greenhouse. And he looks down and he says, I guess the greenhouse effect can kill you. And then that's actually, I wrote that entire movie based on that one line, just to be able to deliver that line. But yeah, I think that would be cool.
In that film idea, the villain is an eco-terrorist.
Yeah.
But it strikes me, okay, this brings me into like a couple of questions. Well, one is another story you have, and we don't have to go into it in huge depth, but you've told me about this 9 meals theory.
Yeah. I once read this quote. I don't exactly remember where I read it or where I heard it, but it said that we're always 9 meals away from anarchy. And I think what that means is, in this modern civilization where we go and get our food from the grocery store, and that's where we think food comes from, what if the truck stopped rolling? What if the lights went out? What if we weren't able to communicate, use cell phones, anything like that? And the food stops coming in, how quickly the veneer of society, evaporates. And how quickly, we would turn to, inhuman acts to feed ourselves, to feed our family, to take care of things. And that idea has always fascinated me because we live right next to this 24-hour grocery store, and I look out from my balcony of all these amenities that are at my fingertips, but it seems like such an illusion. It seems like, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like it can last forever because of the internet, we can see what's going on elsewhere in the world, and it doesn't make sense that things should be this easy. And how inefficient the system really is. What it takes for me to get a lime in my drink that comes all the way from South America or Africa, all of these thousands of kilometers and all of the machines and hands that touch this thing, all the way to come to my grocery store and I buy this lime for $1 and it's in my drink, and we don't even think about it, right? And that's not natural. It really isn't.
Are you a doomsday prepper?
I'm definitely not a doomsday prepper, but I think just my mind, I love those types of movies, like post-apocalyptic type of thing, just thinking of what could happen, and human nature. And I do think people are generally good, but I think that's not the issue. I think it's the issue of people definitely want to survive first. And for generations now, we've never had to even come close to having to survive, and we wouldn't even know what to do, and people would be ill-prepared, and it would be a pretty scary situation.
Sometimes it's hard to discern when you're being sarcastic or sincere about certain topics.
I've heard that before.
Sometimes you're hard to read in that way, and it's interesting.
Well, it's like with things like that, right? Like we're talking about like the end of civilization as we know it. That's a pretty dark thought, and it's a pretty uncomfortable thought for most people. And because I'm writing this sort of film, I think about it a lot more than the average Joe. And whenever I bring up topics like that, it tends to make people pretty uncomfortable. People don't want to think about that stuff. So, and that's a really uncomfortable thought, right? I mean, the fact that, your super civilized next door neighbor would hurt you for food, and that's fucked.
Well, as you know, I spent a few years working on a documentary about genocide.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot actually about how thin that veneer is.
History repeats itself. I don't want to get all doom and gloom. There are a lot of things going on in the world right now that, could be signs of tough times to come, right? I mean, the decimation of the middle class is a huge one. And you've got this huge wealth gap with the 1% or the 0.1% and everybody else. And I think that you can keep people in check and they'll continue to live their lives as long as they think that there's a chance of winning the game. But the second they realize that that game is rigged and they can't win, that's when you get angry. You know what I mean? That's really frustrating because it makes you... That's when hegemony breaks, right? You no longer believe you have the illusion of choice, and that's when people get really angry, and that's when crazy things happen.
As children of the 80s, I think we come from a particularly cynical generation.
Well, and things are changing so much right in front of our eyes. Our parents come from this generation where, you didn't even need to, have a serious education. You could go to work, get a job, go to work hard, keep that same job for 30, 35, 40 years, get a pension. You made a ton of money on your real estate investments. So it wasn't easy to buy a house, but you were able to do so. And your house, gained a lot of value. And now the boomers are sitting pretty for the most part. We're in this generation where they're eliminating full-time jobs, and it's going to be things like contract work, and it's people jump careers all over the place. And now we, because of the internet, we know about all of these different global problems that, before people just watch the news, and now they can get news from the source, not just from gatekeepers that tell them what's what, right? And it's easy to be cynical because we're bombarded by tough issues and tough topics every day. We're cynical because we're starting to realize that maybe we don't have as much choice as we would have liked. And that's why I decided to start a business instead of go that corporate route, is because, if anything, I've got at least a little bit more control over what I do, not complete control. I still answer, instead of answering to one boss, now I answer to many clients. But, at least I feel like I have control. Am I going anywhere with this?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Let me ask you
Who
this.
the hell knows? I don't know.
Where are you at your most creative?
Where am I at my most creative? Well, I'd say I come up, typically, like I'll come up with a concept, and who knows where it'll come from. It'll just sort of be like a thought, a nugget of something. And I tend to do most of my thinking like late at night, and I actually am a pacer. Like I'll just kind of walk around my condo like over and over and just pace and think and almost plan out the entire campaign in my head before I ever really put anything down on paper.
What is your biggest ambition? If there was like an ultimate, and don't feel like inside the box that it doesn't even need to be a video or a movie.
Yep.
Anything. In this world, what is your biggest ambition?
I mean, I think like most people, it would be leaving a legacy, and that's what's so cool about making a great film, or even just making a film that a few people like. It's something that potentially could live forever, or not live forever, but live beyond you, and it'll last longer, and it'll affect people that you've never met and will never meet. Like that's really cool. Being able to make people feel something. And what more could you want, right? Like I think that's what artists do what they do. And it's not an ego thing necessarily. It's just I don't know. We just want to leave something that we're remembered by and remembered fondly, hopefully. That's the ultimate goal for me. Like long term. Short term, mostly it's get lunch. But, that's And that's a goal I tend to achieve pretty often. So getting lunch. Sorry, I'm not saying funny things.
No.
I probably will at some point. I'll say something really funny. I don't know what though. Could be anything.
Looking back at the artifice that is this interview, like, if you could ask me a question, what would it be?
I guess a question that I would ask you, because you're a fellow creator, and I ask this to a lot of creators because I think about it myself, is like, what keeps you going? Because, when things are good, they're awesome. But when things get low, they're really tough, right? And we really question like why we're doing this. So what keeps you going and what keeps you motivated? How do you keep going?
I think the short answer to that is that even though there are moments that are low and some of those moments can drag on for a while, the one point that keeps me motivated and going back to doing what I do is knowing that there isn't something else that I'd rather be doing. That the drive to be creative and to tell stories is not, it's like a sex drive. It's just there. You don't choose for it to be there. You can't get rid of it.
Goofy, silly, random thought Chris, that does not excel in a boardroom. That is not who is at the top level. And I don't want to be that. I just want to be me. When you give somebody an asset for their business that they can use for years to come, that will help them drive, that will help them drive business, not just a corporate video that somebody gave you a script for and said, make this. That's really cool, right? You've given these entrepreneurs like this tool to go out and drive business for themselves or to introduce themselves to the world or their passion or their product or their service or whatever. I remember when I showed, the guy's name is Mihai, when I showed him his video for the first time, he actually cried. And because he saw that this was going to be really important to his business. And, that's a feeling you chase over and over as a filmmaker, impacting people in a really positive way, not just collecting a paycheck, right? You could stay at a job and do that.
This is my last question. It's a two-parter.
Okay.
This might go off the rails, but we talked about us being children of the 80s. We've talked about the amount of technological change. We've talked about the way society has changed, bringing this all together. Just overall, in our, we're approximately a little over 30 years old. Over the last 30 years, how has the world changed?
Oh, the world's changed dramatically in the last 30 years. We were pretty much the last generation to be born into a world without the internet, and it's sort of evolved as we've grown up. Now, kids that are being born into the internet generation, it's a completely different world. It's like the Matrix. You want to know how to fly a helicopter, you punch it in. You can probably find a tutorial that'll teach you how to fly a helicopter. You can just, there's instant access to information for anything on any topic, anytime, anywhere. And that's why, the whole process of gatekeeping is breaking down, and now people can get information right from the source with things like Twitter and now, even Periscope, right? Being able to broadcast live video from your cell phone anytime, anywhere. It makes people more accountable. We're seeing this with, policing in the United States or, anywhere in the world. Just this overwhelming access to information that is reshaping everything. And it's super exciting on one hand. I could not have started my own business by myself without the internet. I got all of my information on there of how to register the business name and how to set up the taxes and how to set up a corporation. And every day I read blogs about entrepreneurship or selling or video or, just anything. And we can always be learning.
What did the world look like in the 80s?
The world, at least at the time, well, again, we were kids, who knows, but it seemed simpler. You go out, you go to school, you get a job, you work that job, you come home, build a family, buy a house, get a dog, and then, that sort of repeats. And now, because of the internet and the media culture and access to information, everything's kind of changed. So, yeah, it was definitely a simpler time.
You called it blissful.
It was blissful. It was a blissful time. It was ignorance is bliss, right? We didn't know all of the world's problems, and now you go online and, if it bleeds, it leads, right? Everywhere you look, there's bad news about this or that, or trouble here and trouble there. And
so what does, on a half serious note,
Yeah.
what does the world look like 30 years in the future?
I hope that in 30 years that we see ourselves as more of a global population and less of, nation states. Although, of course, nation states are still going to exist. But just we tackle, because of the cloud and because of, access to each other and communication, that we tackle problems together. Because back in the day, the people that made decisions were the ones that went to the best schools and got the best jobs, and they were in these positions. But now, maybe there's a kid that never went to school. That's a math genius that has the answer to some big question, or has answers to questions that we don't even know to ask yet. And it's about leveraging that, bringing all of these minds into this sort of global consciousness. Maybe that's what things look like in 30 years. Hopefully the power's still on, that's for sure.